Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today's video is a blast from the past with a difference. Most of these that I've done have been bringing forward an old video based on a trip out. Now this one is totally different. Long time ago there were things going round called Orchid Tags, where a set of questions would be put to the various orchid YouTubers, and this video is my turn basically. It's unusual in as much as it basically is a slideshow of every orchid that had bloomed for me by that time, and there's some good ones and some surprises probably for you that weren't with the channel that long ago basically. So I'll put the questions up. They'll also be in the description for those who can see descriptions if you want to read the questions, and then basically the video itself with the old music and all that sort of stuff, the old introduction. It is an old video, and basically it's me just answering the questions from the Orchid Tag at that time. Hope you enjoy it. I certainly enjoyed doing it, I must admit. So there's some funny stories and all sorts of things. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. I'm eventually getting round to the dreaded Orchid Tag. Thanks to Andrea from the channel Orchids and a Duchy for sticking me in the frame. I think it's a thanks anyway. I'll give it a go. Everybody else has had a go, why shouldn't I? So first couple of questions are based on best orchid stories and experiences, and I've grown orchids since I was at college, when I was at teens. I've had orchids around the house. Phalaenopsis, store-bought stuff, but nonetheless they're still orchids. They still need a type of care, so they've just always been around, and they've been around and survived with complete ignorance, and luckily Phalaenopsis lend themselves to that style of care, like watering when you remember, not worrying about the water quality, not worrying about where you stick the plant. If it looks nice in the middle of the dining room table, then that's where it lives. So yeah, a few stories then. When I first joined an orchid society, I did it based on their website, which said they had a coach trip coming up to Burnham Orchid Nurseries down in Devon. And I'd never been to an orchid nursery before, and I was starting to get a little bit more interested in perhaps getting out into some other genera and not just sticking with Phalaenopsis. In fact, I had a Dendrobium nobile at the time. That was my only variable. So I went on their coach trip because it was open to non-members, and they seemed a nice bunch of orchid loonies, right from geeky scientist types to, people who grew a few Phalaenopsis on a windowsill, to people who never spoke to anyone, to people who never stopped speaking to everyone. And I joined the Orchid Society, and not long after that, one of the first events that came up was what they call their summer garden party, which one of the members lives on what once was a farm. So it's got a huge amount of land, it's got some woodland, it's got some pastures, it's got a lovely garden, and it's quite in the middle of nowhere. It's a smashing place to go, which I discovered when I got there. But I arrived a little bit late because it took me a while to find it, and I headed off down this little lane that then lost its tarmac and became a gravel lane, and then the potholes got bigger and bigger, and some were full of water, and I messed up my car that I'd just cleaned, and I didn't think this place could be down the end of this lane. There was nothing down there. The lane sort of fizzled out into woodland and down one side and heathland down the other side, and I thought there can't be any houses down here, it's not possible. So I turned around and went back, and then luckily I met some other orchid loonies that I recognised coming down the lane in the opposite direction, so I managed to find somewhere to turn around, and I got there, and a bit late, as I said, and I could see where the cars went, so I parked up okay, and out under the shade of some trees were all these chairs set up and people milling around and, you know, all that sort of stuff. I thought, oh, this is where it all happens. So I started to wander over. And as I wandered over, I could see lots of very, very impressive vandas in the trees. And I thought to myself, God, this guy must be an absolutely brilliant grower. He's growing vandas in the trees in the UK. And I mentioned this to somebody, and they reminded me that those were the vandas that people had bought in to sell, and they were hanging in the trees for display purposes. I swore that person to secrecy. I said, don't you dare tell anyone I thought those plants were growing in the trees. I will feel such a fool. And I did feel a fool. I felt an absolute idiot for making such a stupid mistake. But that's part of the learning curve. You know, if you make mistakes and find out the mistake you've made, then you've learned something. You know, if nobody ever contradicts you or nobody ever prompts you or anything like that, you blurt ahead in your life thinking you're right all the time. I always say, if you lose an argument, you've learned something. If you win an argument, you've learned nothing. All you've done is put your opinion across and won the argument. So, you know, it pays to listen to other people. So that'll do for an orchid story. Roger practically making an idiot of himself. And another one springs to mind. At one of the meetings, I'd been doing some work, you know, looking up things on the internet and stuff like that to do with some recent orchid purchases, and I'd got some Paphiopedilums, and a couple of articles mentioned that some of the paths actually like quite an alkaline base because they come from limestone cliffs that are often just running in water, so they're obviously growing in an alkaline area. So even though they're basically terrestrials, which would normally grow in leaf litter and on the ground, which tends to be a little more acidic in most places, these were exceptions. So I thought, well, at the next meeting I'll go and have a chat to somebody about Paphiopedilums and how do they raise the alkalinity of their media, and think, you know, just a general sort of chat like that. So I spotted somebody that wasn't in the middle of a conversation and walked up to the guy, and in my innocence I said, I need a bit of information about Paphiopedilums. Who do you think I should ask? And he looked really puzzled at me, as if, you know, I'd just declared war on somebody, you know. And then he said, I'm head of the Paphiopedilum Society. I've got RHS awards for some of my hybrids. I breed Paphiopedilums. Why don't you ask me? And I was stumped. I didn't know what to say. I just asked the Orchid Society's expert on Paphiopedilums who else I should ask about them. So you do feel a fool sometimes, but we get over it. I'm great friends with the guy now. Right, on to the next one, orchid peeves. Top of the list goes to vendors that are selling orchids that are not orchid people. They've imported them in, they don't look after them. I've seen orchids being sold in a market when the temperature is -2. They've got their Paphiopedilums out in a bitter cold winter wind with some lovely blooms on, and they're going to sell them to you to take home and die. It's out of order. I really do get cross at the sort of treatment that some people give their orchids, but they're just a commodity to those people. They throw them around, bash them around, forget to water them, drown them, do all sorts of nasty things to them, but because they've got such long-lasting nice blooms, we go ahead and buy them in all good faith. So pet peeves are poorly looked after orchids, orchids with rubbish root systems that you're going to have a hell of a job to recover, and some never do. And it can be really disheartening for newer people. They see a lovely orchid, they love the blooms, and they take it home and it promptly dies on them, and they blame themselves. They think it's all their fault and they can't keep orchids, so they lose interest in the whole subject, and it's just not right. You know, orchids are not that difficult. Some are, but most, you know, you can get along with if you give them the right environment. So that's peeve number 1. Peeve number 2, which probably affects more people than might even be imagined, is keep chopping and changing the names about. I know science needs to get everything as right as it can,
so I understand what's going on. But you know, changing a Neophonetia falcata to a Vanda, a Vanda in comparison to the original name is just boring. And if you have a chat to the Japanese Neophonetia societies that there are, whole cultures have been based around their lovely wind orchid, as they call it, you know, they'd be outraged. But nonetheless, it's happened. So if you're going to show your plants, especially anywhere near the RHS in the UK, if the plant name's not right, it won't get judged. So you've got to sort of keep up with it, whether you like it or not. Our Orchid Society has tolerances, so if a plant name's recently changed, or they don't necessarily agree with the change, you can still show your plants with the old name. People are still putting plants in with Odontoglossum written on it. Now that's been gone a while now. They're Oncidiums, lumped in with another load of Oncidiums, so they're not even differentiated anymore. But we still allow that sort of thing. So peeves. My favourite gift, and again this has a little story to it. After I retired from my career, which was in IT, I was an IT consultant for the last sort of 15 years of my career life, and I eventually packed in that work. I got a little job with a car rental company, driving their cars around, delivering them, collecting them, picking up customers, dropping them off, that sort of thing. It was just a little local job, brought in some pennies, saved me dipping into my retirement pot of gold, and you know, I enjoyed it in the main. But one of our customers was Double H Nurseries, which is a Paphiopedilum grower in the UK. They supply orchids to many of the large supermarkets and things like that. You can go and find their website and have a look at their production line. It's phenomenal. There are millions of Phalaenopsis growing, from deflasked little plug plants right up to being wrapped up and stuck in a lorry and sent out for sale. They're very good plants. It's a smashing place to visit. But it's mainly Phalaenopsis hybrids. That's what they do, you know, for the general public market. But I went to collect a car from somebody who hired from us quite frequently, and she was late back, so I had to wait because we needed the car. And when she got back, I thought, well, I'll help her unload her stuff. So she opened the hatchback, and in the back were some boxes with some sample orchids in. She'd been out looking around for things to new customers, I presume. Anyway, there was one box that had Dendrobium nobilis in, smashing plants in full bloom. I've got one of them, but therein lies the story. I looked at her and I said, these are not your normal Phalaenopsis. I didn't know you did Dendrobiums. And she said, well, we don't. They're a sample line that we think we might go into, but we probably won't put them on the production line. We'll probably get them in like a year away from flowering and just, you know, get them up to blooming size, package them and then sell them on. It's just something we might do. And I said, well, you know, nobilis are all very well, you know, but they can be a bit fussy when you're trying to get them to rebloom. You know, they have to go into this sort of winter rest thing. I mean, I now know that the hybrids aren't as fussy as I thought they were, but that's the sort of rules that people seem to apply. And she had this puzzled look on her face while I was helping with her boxes. And when I put the box down, she took one of the best plants out of there and she just held it out and gave it to me, and she said, you seem to know more about these than I do, so you have it. She just gave me a really nice nobili. So that's the best gift I've ever had, and a very good reason, you know, for getting that gift. What else have we got then? Enlightening discovery. Well, I think top of the list there is finding the YouTube orchid channels. You know, that happened as an accident. You know, you just go on Google and start looking for information about orchids, and if you're lucky you might get one of the links to an orchid channel pop up in part of that list of, you know, available information. And it was a link that took me to Danny's channel, and I watched a couple of videos. I had down the look down the list of hundreds and hundreds of videos. I thought, God, it's going to take me months to get through all of these. And of course, when you're looking at a video on YouTube, on the right hand side you see the links to other related videos, and I started seeing other channels that were all about orchids, and I've probably gained more information and more enjoyment from the YouTube channels than any other source. I still Google specific plant names if I thinking of getting one, and the reason for that is before I get a plant, especially a species, I like to know as much about it as possible, and sometimes that will mean I'm not having that plant. I mean, I saw a beautiful plant the other day, and as soon as I looked into it, it said warm to hot growing, one of the first things it said. So we're not going down that road. I can't do those sort of temperatures, not through the winter anyway. So, enlightening discovery, YouTube, orchid channels. Marvellous place. Lots of different ways of growing things. I mean, I've seen the waterculture channels, various people doing marvellous things down that road. It goes against the grain of every book you can read. But bearing in mind, most of the books that you can read are probably 20 plus years out of date, and some of them are 40 or 50 years old. Information can become redundant in time. We learn new things as we go along. Science is always discovering things about how nutrients are absorbed by plants and the effect on different light levels. Science is great. It can tell us lots of things. Famous comedian once said that science doesn't know everything. If it did, it would stop. Pause for thought. So science is always discovering new things. Once upon a time it told us the world was flat. I think we know better now. So you take your science with a pinch of salt. It can be superseded, but it's giving us good stuff. Best practices. This one's difficult because everybody's got their own environment, and what is a best practice for one person could be an orchid killer for another. So it's a subjective subject in itself, best practices. I mean, I'm naughty, I reuse my water, and we've had a little saga in recent days, which I thought was a consequence of that. As it turns out, it's not. But it was a worry. It threw me into a minor panic. I don't do major panics. I always sort of go along the lines of what somebody once said. Don't panic, but there's nothing else left to do. So until you've looked at all your options and gone through all of that process, why panic at the beginning? Why not look into the options first, and then if there's nothing left to do, maybe have a panic. I'm not a panicky type, but that did throw a little bit of a wobbly. But all resolved now. So my best practices are, certainly where species and primary hybrids are concerned, is to learn as much about my individual plants as I possibly can. The internet is a vast array of information. It's not all good, don't get me wrong. Not every word on the internet is true, and that's a true statement. So, do your research, amalgamate all the information you can, and get as much information about that plant. If it says cool to cold grower and you grow intermediate, that might not be the best plant to go and spend a lot of money on, because you're probably going to kill it. Or at best it's not going to do very well or as well as it could. So best practice for me is get as much information as you can prior to buying a plant. Following on from the buying a plant bit, the best way I believe to buy a plant is to go somewhere where you can pick the flipping thing up, turn it upside down, have a look at all the growths, have a poke around, see if it's got some roots. Possibly the sort of place where you will find that plant might be somewhere where there's a knowledgeable person around that you can also ask, get a bit of information. We don't all do that. A lot of us buy online. We've got no choice. Perhaps we haven't got access to nice orchid nurseries or places where a huge variety of plants are for sale. And obviously you've got import and export related problems depending on where you live and where the orchids actually live. But I'm sure a lot of us have bought online at some point or another. It can lead to disappointments. You can buy a plant in all good faith that says flowering size, and when it arrives you think, in your dreams there's no way that's flowering size. You've cheated me, and you feel cheated. But nonetheless, you have got the plant you actually wanted. Okay, you might have to wait a year or two and look after it a bit longer before you get the lovely blooms, but that's online purchases. Then we switch to eBay purchases. Now on eBay, if somebody says the plant you will receive is like the one in the picture, I would dump it. I wouldn't go near it, because why not take a picture of the actual plant? If you're not going to take a picture of the actual plant, there's a reason you're hiding something. So I would avoid that one. However, if a seller's got a picture of a beautiful bloom that they openly admit is not the bloom on the plant they're selling you, and then they've got 4 or 5 pictures of the plant they are actually going to sell you, from the left side, the right side, looking down from the top, perhaps a picture of a clear pot showing the root system, a close-up of the base of the plant showing the nice new growths coming out. That's as close as you can get to picking the pot up and looking at it for yourself. So that's not bad. So don't write off eBay. I've got some specimen plants off a couple of sellers on eBay, and they are my pride and joy. And I didn't spend an arm and a leg getting them. I didn't need a bank loan. They were reasonably priced. There are idiots on eBay selling plants for stupid prices. All you've got to do is look around and see what sort of price those plants are selling for. There's somebody's got a problem with probably a monetary conversion, but there's somebody in Greece that keeps putting up plants for £250 English pounds, £300. I think what they mean is £25 or £30. They've just got a decimal place in the wrong place, because who the hell is going to buy a £300 orchid online without physically seeing that plant? You'd be an idiot, quite honestly. So anyway, best practices: get as much knowledge as you can before you buy, and if you do a compulsive purchase, you're at a show and you see a plant for sale and you think, oh, I've just got to have that, it's wonderful, well then do your research when you get home. If you've got a decent phone, Google it there and then and find out as much as you can, and then make your decision. But find out as much as you can. Apart from that, my best practice is just to do as well as I can for the individual plants I've got. That's it in a summary. Places to buy I've sort of covered already in the middle of best practices, because they sort of, to me, go together. Places not to buy: places that are online and won't show you a picture of the plant unless you know from others that have done the same thing that it's a reliable source. Places not to buy: an open air market in the winter when the temperature's -5. I don't think there are any orchids that would survive that, and certainly Phalaenopsis don't. You've already set that plant back onto its death road. It's on its path. You take it home to die. It's been chilled beyond repair. And that can apply to some garden centres. I saw some lovely orchids for sale in a garden centre, and I was at the sales table and I thought, oh, that's some really nice orchids. And then I looked around me. 3 sides of that area were open to the elements. It was February. The nighttime temperature about to descend on those Phalaenopsis was probably only 1 or 2 degrees. So the plants are in a stage of death. They're on their way down. So watch where you buy your plants from. So, worst advice I've ever been given. That's a difficult one, because I don't ever take advice at face value. Again, I would take the advice and then compare it with other people's advice, or the written word, or the internet, or whatever. So I don't tend to accept advice on face value, so it's difficult to give me bad advice, if you see what I mean. I think the worst advice I've ever had, which in virtually every book, unless it's a very recent sort of publication, is that, oh, you must repot your orchids in the spring. Full stop. The statement is not complete. You should repot your orchids when they need to be repotted. And I don't even care if they're in bloom. If that orchid is crying out to get out of a breaking down acidic media, it's coming out of the pot. And if I lose that flower spike, so be it. I gain the plant. So I think that's the worst advice I've ever been given, is repot your plant in the spring. Full stop. However, if it said repot your orchid in the spring, or when there are signs of new growth and roots, that's a more complete statement. that makes a bit more sense, because that implies that perhaps it might not be spring when that happens. And if you think about cattleyas who love playing games, you've got cattleyas that push out a new growth and new roots roughly at the same time. It's got a little label sticking on there, repot me now, unless you did it last year or whatever, you know what I mean. And then there are cattleyas that push out their new growth, and you keep looking and you keep looking, and are there any roots? Are there? Hell. And that growth will push on, and it might start another one, and that one will push on, and it will get right up, and the leaves will start opening, and you keep looking, and are there any roots? What's wrong with my plant? It just happens to be one of those that doesn't grow its new roots until the pseudobulbs are well towards maturity. And then there's another type, which are almost like that, which don't push out the new roots until after the bulbs are mature, or they push their new roots out prior to the new growths. Those could be one and the same thing if you think about it. So again, the time to repot your orchid is when it tells you, or when it has to be done. And to me, has to be done takes the priority. If I buy a plant that's come from a garden centre or something like that, the chances are in the middle of that pot is a sphagnum ball that the little seedling plant was originally planted in, that somebody couldn't be asked to take off, so they've left it on there. The sphagnum's long since broken down, it's rotted, it's compacted, and it's killed all the roots that were contained in it. So the centre of the plant has now got no roots. However, with a phalaenopsis at least, it will have pushed out roots into the other media around the outside of that sphagnum ball. Those could be brilliant roots, but the media it's put into will be the cheapest available option that will last long enough to get that plant to a sales table and make somebody a profit. So at the point of sale, the media is probably coming to the end of its life. So again, a repot's going to be not urgent, but quite soon perhaps. You know, if you pick up your bits of bark and they fall apart in your fingers, then the repot time is now. Okay, so right, best advice. It's the same advice I would give anybody that asks me, do your homework. That's it. Just do your homework. Find out what others do. Have a think about where your plant's going to go. Have a think about the conditions. Find out if the plant you're about to get is going to be okay in those conditions. That includes your bathroom windowsill, your dining room table, your greenhouse, your grow room, hanging up in a tree in the garden. You know, I've seen some lovely YouTube videos with people growing outside. It makes me cry. I'd love to be able to grow all my plants outdoors. The difference that fresh air makes to orchids and other related plants is outstanding. Fresh air, breezes, actual rain, it does them the world of good. That's how they're supposed to grow. They're not really supposed to grow on a dining room table, but they will. Okay, so best advice I can give anybody is do your homework, do your research, especially if you're delving into species, if you're moving to a genera that you have none of. So this is going to be your first one, like it might be your first ever species Dendrobium. Well, have a look and see where it comes from. If it grows near the top of a mountain, it's not going to do very well in your lounge because it's too flipping warm. You know, vice versa. Some orchids come from hot, steamy jungles where the temperature never drops down below 22, 23 degrees. The day lengths are, 11 to 13 hours long, and the humidity stays up 80% plus, and they have monsoon rains. That's not much like your dining room table or your kitchen windowsill. So do your homework. It's the best advice I can give. And big thanks to everybody that's subscribed to my channel. That helps me. I'm a little bit of a schemer. If I go onto somebody else's Orchid channel, yes, I enjoy the video, and I always try and do the like, and I always leave comments if I think I've got something to say, even if it's just great blooms, thanks for sharing. It's nice to comment. I think everybody should. We all take part, and it makes everybody's YouTube experience more enjoyable. You know, if you go to the trouble of making a video and, you know, it's sort of getting late in the day, and bearing in mind when I'm going to bed, there's 2/3 of the world that are just getting up. You know, so we've got different time zones. You know, you make your video, you wait God knows how long for YouTube to actually get the flipping thing loaded. God, that's painfully slow. And, you know, you think, great. And then you know, go out for the day and you come back and you have your tea and you watch a bit of telly or whatever you do, and then you go to bed and you get up the next morning with great anticipation. Let's go and see what's happened to my video. And you open it up and there's 1 like and no comments. And you sort of think, oh, why do I bother? So make the comments, you know, even if it's only thanks for sharing, they're always appreciated. We're all in this together. It's like a little club. It's good fun. It's good fun. And you might get some of your comments shouted down. That's life. We can't all be right all of the time. And those that think they are have just been wrong again. We're not all right all of the time. None of us are. Okay, so that's my lot. And thanks for my subscribers. They seem to be creeping up slowly but surely. And go on to other orchid channels, have a look round. And a little tip, it's a bit naughty, but when you're looking at some of the more famous orchid channels that get loads of comments and have got thousands and thousands of subscribers, have a look at the people who are making the comments. And if you just have a quick look to one side against their ID, you come across their own channel. Now you might find that they have no subscribers and have no videos. So those sort of people are comment people. You know, they've joined in just to make some comments. They're not going to do videos and stuff like that. But you might come across somebody who's got 20 really good orchid videos and a couple of dozen subscribers. They might be quite new. They're up and coming, as you say. Well, go and subscribe to them. They'll see you've subscribed, providing you make your subscriptions public. Another tip, go and have a look at your settings. And they'll probably come back and subscribe to your channel. Tick, another one added. So it's a big club of people, and the way to get people to join in is to go and join in with them, and they'll probably come back and join in with you. And your club gets bigger, the club gets bigger amount of information, more blooms to look at, more types of plants that you may have never even heard of. I come across plants I can't even pronounce, let alone have heard of. And let's all join in, let's have some fun. And another thing, don't take it all so seriously. Have some fun, have a joke now and again. Even if it does get you in the doghouse sometime. Anyway, that's my orchid tag. I'm supposed to tag a couple of other people now. Well, I'm not going to do it in the video. I'll do it in the description, because at the moment I like to use people's names. So although I've got a couple of channels in mind, I need to go and have a look at some of the comments where people will have used their first name so that I can address them properly, rather than just calling somebody Bumblebee. You know, I'd like to go and find the person's name out so I can talk to them properly. So yeah, I'll tag a couple of people and then you can be put in the spotlight as well. Thanks for dropping by, thanks for listening. Hope some of it's been interesting. It won't all be interesting to everybody, but that's life. See you again next time.